Welcome to the deep dive. We take a whole stack of sources, pull out the key stuff, and basically lay it out for you.
Yep, making sense of the complex fast.
Exactly. And today we're looking at Jasmine Crockett, her whole journey, really, from growing up in Tex Arcana right through to that moment on TV everyone talks about.
And the ripples afterwards, yeah.
Right. And our source material here, it's mainly this detailed written narrative. It's based on real events, giving us a pretty deep look into her life.
Which is great because it gives us more than just, dates and facts. It gets into the feeling, the context.
Totally. So our mission, if you like, is to really get under the skin of those key moments.
Yeah.
What drove her? What does her story tell us about, well, power, justice, how you communicate effectively?
And maybe sometimes how ineffectively others communicate.
Maybe so. Okay, so where do we start? Texarkana, Arkansas. The beginning.
Yeah, the narrative paints it as like this place straddling a state line, both
Yeah.
community and these invisible boundaries. Dreams are kind of whispers there.
What does that duality, that setting, tell us about her early on? It sounds complicated.
Well, I think it's key. Imagine belonging somewhere completely. Everyone knows your family. But at the same time, you feel these like unspoken rules, these limits.
Right.
That tension, that push and pull, it often forces a certain kind of resilience. You learn to navigate things very carefully, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. And her family sounds like the bedrock. Her dad, Bernard, a truck driver, man of faith, quiet but impactful.
Uh-huh. And her mother, Loretta, a nurse.
Yeah.
All about endurance, the power of maybe not speaking sometimes. High standards.
Very high standards, it seems. Strict but loving is how it's described. Church was big, too. How did those parental styles mesh, do you think?
That sounds like a really potent mix. You've got the father's, quiet integrity, the moral compass, then the mother's focus on inner strength, expecting the
It's
best.
a balance.
Yeah, almost. Like the narrative mentions his firm discipline versus her maybe quiet disappointment. It suggests they covered different bases, guided her in different ways.
And we see early signs of her, well, standing up, reciting Bible verses without flinching at 6 years old. Her sister Pauline saying, "You've got fire in you."
That sisterly comment feels important, like an early validation. Don't let the world smother it.
Yeah. But she also learned to, read the room, to shrink sometimes.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being defiant. It was strategic, maybe, learning when to yield and when, crucially, to push back.
Like correcting a teacher on Civil War history.
Hmm.
Or refusing to stand for a racist comment. Small moments, but
But they plant something deep, right?
yeah.
The early sense of injustice, and importantly, the willingness to act on it, even in small ways.
And the narrative makes this really interesting point. She rose because of Tex Arcana, not despite it.
It does, and that flips the script a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That whole gotta escape the small town idea.
Yeah.
It suggests that the complexities, even the limitations of her upbringing weren't just obstacles. They were like the raw materials for her strength. The understanding she got there, that was the foundation.
Okay, so moving on, those early seeds, they definitely start to grow. That fourth grade incident sticks out, challenging the teacher over how slavery was presented.
Yeah, that feels significant. Directly questioning the official story based on her own knowledge, her family's stories, it shows that commitment to like the unvarnished truth early on.
And the narrative ties it back to her mother's influence, those stories she heard.
Right, that intergenerational knowledge shaping her view. It wasn't just abstract history for her.
And it wasn't just history either. She started noticing biases right there in the classroom. How groups were picked, how certain kids, Marcus and Maria are mentioned, were treated differently.
Yeah, even without the fancy terms like systemic bias, she could see the unfairness. That shows a really sharp eye for, power dynamics, even as a kid.
Probably fueled that later drive to understand why things were unequal.
I'd bet on it.
Then there's the story of her defending her friend, Tanisha, standing up against an unfair detention, saying, "You can't punish someone just for sounding confident."
Huh? That's pretty bold for a kid. And getting labeled mouthy for it.
But her parents' reaction, "Don't let them clip your tongue before it learns to fly." That's powerful.
Hugely powerful. That validation from home is everything. It basically says, your voice matters, even if it makes people uncomfortable. That mouthy label almost becomes a badge of honor in hindsight.
Right. By middle school, she's known for it. Asking tough questions, disrupting the silence, refusing to go along with cruelty.
And understanding that power isn't just about being the loudest. That's pretty insightful for that age. Recognizing influence can come from questioning, from refusing to conform.
Which seems to carry through to college. Rhodes College, political science major. Not from a political family, apparently.
No, and not the loudest person in the seminar room either, according to the narrative. But known for clarity. She wanted to understand the why behind the power structures.
Less about grabbing power, more about dissecting it at that stage.
Exactly.
And then comes this encounter with a civil rights attorney. That seems to be the moment things click towards law.
Yeah, the light bulb moment. Seeing law not as like dusty books, but as something that directly impacts real people, their access to justice or lack thereof.
It channels that intellectual curiosity into action.
Strictly.
So, law school, University of Houston Law Center. And she deliberately chooses public interest law.
Right. Fueled by determination, not privilege, the narrative emphasizes. She's volunteering in legal clinics, doing eviction cases, seeing herself fighting for people, not, big corporations.
Very intentional choices.
Absolutely. It all points towards advocating for, as her paper put it, justice in the margins.
And that paper getting called too emotional, but she took it as a point of pride. What's that about?
I think it's her pushing back against that old idea that law has to be cold and detached. She's basically saying, look, these are human lives. Of course, there's emotion involved. And acknowledging that doesn't make the legal argument weaker. It makes it real.
And choosing public defense after that described not as easy, but necessary. Fighting for the unheard.
Yeah, that really cements it. Public defense is tough, often thankless, under-resourced work. To choose it because you feel you have to be that voice. That says a lot about her core values.
So she gets into the courtroom, and it's not Law and Order.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The narrative makes that clear. It's real, huge workload, constant urgency, but also purpose.
And that very first case sounds intense. A 17-year-old accused of assaulting an officer. And the key. A shaky cell phone video.
Talk about a trial by fire. It immediately shows her how precarious justice can be, how easily a story can be shaped, and how crucial just one piece of overlooked evidence, like that video, can be.
It must have hit home how easily things go wrong when no one's really looking out for the accused.
Exactly. And it seems to solidify her view. Vulnerable people deserve a defense. The system isn't inherently just. You have to actively push it, challenge it.
It's a shift from just applying law to questioning the whole structure.
Right.
And then there's that recurring experience being mistaken for a defendant in her own courtroom.
Yeah. That constant background noise of bias. The narrative says she mentally cataloged it, prejudice from opposing lawyers, judges, even colleagues.
That must have been incredibly frustrating.
Frustrating, yes, but also probably illuminating. It's not just one person being rude. It's seeing the pattern, the system reinforcing itself.
But instead of letting it grind her down, she adapts, learns to use silence strategically, studies communication, makes herself impossible to ignore.
Which is smart. It's not about changing who she is, but about finding the most effective way to operate within that biased system. Using their own tools, almost, but better. Silence can be incredibly powerful.
And she starts seeing her role as a translator, bridging the gap between this big, complex system and the individuals caught up in it.
Yeah, reminding everyone that the law means nothing if it doesn't actually protect the most vulnerable. That's not just being a lawyer, it's being a true advocate.
Then someone tells her she has a chip on her shoulder. Her internal reaction is fascinating, seeing it not as her own personal anger, but as carrying generations of exclusion.
That's such a critical insight. It reframes the whole thing. It's not about her being touchy. It's about recognizing the weight of history and systemic unfairness she's carrying. That many carry. The person making the comment just doesn't get it.
Then the welfare fraud case? That sounds like a real low point. The courtroom feeling like a cage, losing even with a strong case because of bias and systemic issues.
Yeah, the narrative paints that as a major turning point. The gut-wrenching realization, maybe this system isn't broken, maybe for certain people it's working exactly as it was intended to.
That's incredibly bleak.
Bleak, but also maybe clarifying. It pushes her past, thinking she can fix it just one case at a time.
And leads her to run for office, seeing the need for change at the systemic level.
Right. With encouragement from a mentor. She was apparently hesitant, maybe even scared of politics.
Who wouldn't be?
True. But the need felt stronger. And she saw her front row seat to injustice, not as a liability, but as a unique qualification.
That makes perfect sense. Transitioning from the courtroom to the legislature.
It feels like a logical next step for her, really, taking that fight to a different arena.
So, the campaign. Unconventional is the word used. No big money, no establishment backing initially.
It's just grassroots support, neighbors, former clients, people who knew her, trusted her work ethic.
Lots of door knocking, community meetings, listening more than talking, it says.
And facing skepticism, prejudice, people like you don't win around here, that kind of thing. It sounds like a real uphill battle.
Definitely David and Goliath vibes, and the media focusing on her appearance, not her policies.
A classic tactic.
Right.
But she refused to, soften her image. Refused to play that game.
Yeah, her grit was apparently contagious. Cell phone videos for campaign ads, policy papers on Google Docs, just outworking everyone.
And her message was clear, focusing on real issues: housing, policing, healthcare. Pointing out the systemic flaws, that line again, not broken, just working exactly as it was designed.
Her campaign was built on proof, on her track record.
Exactly. Authenticity.
Election night, a narrow win. A reminder, the narrative says, of how fragile progress can be.
Must have been intense. But her reaction afterwards is telling. I will not shrink myself so someone else can feel taller. I didn't win because I softened. I won because I stayed solid.
Wow. That's a statement, entering office intending to shake things up, not just fit in.
Absolutely. A clear declaration of intent.
Okay, so then, the invitation, national political panel show, seems routine, right? A chance to get her message out wider.
Seems routine. But the description of the studio, cold, bright, performative, and the introduction to Pam Bondi, you kind of feel something coming.
Yeah, the narrative definitely sets a mood. Like, this isn't just another Sunday show appearance.
Feels like the whole story has been building towards this moment, in a way.
And then it happens. Bondi's attack. Sharp, personal, but dressed up as professional critique. Leans too hard on feeling. Lacks the backbone.
All those coded phrases, implying empathy is weakness, especially in a woman, especially in a black woman. The tropes are right there.
And the silence afterwards. Loaded. Jasmine just stays still, observing, understanding exactly what's happening.
She gets the subtext immediately. Bondi's trying to play on stereotypes, undermine her credibility. Jasmine's stillness isn't shock, it's processing, strategizing.
And then her response, calm, deliberate, leaning forward, direct eye contact.
Power move.
Totally. She talks about her actual courtroom work, the necessity of empathy and justice, draws a contrast with Bondi's record, doesn't raise her voice.
It's described as a calm, brutal takedown. She just dismantles the assumptions, uses facts, her experience, reclaims the narrative about what real strength and leadership look like.
The effect is immediate. Bondi's smile vanishes. She's silenced.
And then, boom, the clip goes viral. 48 seconds.
Just 48 seconds, but it becomes this huge symbol. Representative Jasmine Crockett delivers calm, brutal takedown.
Yeah, it captured something people were hungry to see, I think. Quiet strength pushing back effectively.
What's interesting is Jasmine's reaction. The narrative says she wasn't chasing fame. Understood how fleeting internet stuff is, went back to work.
Right. Focused on the policy, the job she was elected to do.
Raw Pam Bondi. She's dealing with the fallout. Silence from allies, failed attempts to spin it. Kind of shows she underestimated her opponent badly.
Completely. And it highlights the difference in their priorities, maybe. Substance versus spectacle.
But Jasmine faced her own kind of fallout too, right? Even within her own party.
Yeah, that's a really telling part. The coded critiques. Too forceful. Tone might alienate moderates. Too much fire burns bridges.
Oof, feeling isolated just for speaking plainly.
It shows that pressure to conform, even among allies. That tightrope walk for someone like her, especially a black woman in politics. But she refused to regret telling the truth.
Still, she becomes the symbol. Letters pour in, people inspired by her calm strength.
And she understands the weight of that, the responsibility, that moment with the young girl noticing her hair, that's powerful representation in action.
But navigating Congress as a symbol, that sounds exhausting. Heightened scrutiny, pressure to be the voice.
Yeah, the loneliness of being both a symbol and just, a representative trying to do her job. Resisting that pressure to be more acceptable while staying true to herself.
Carrying that weight for people who feel invisible. Reminding the room it was never meant to be so quiet. I like that line.
It's great. And she keeps focusing on substance in Congress, not just the viral moments.
Like that maternal health hearing.
Yeah.
Directly tackling racial disparities, saying black women are dying because they are not believed.
That's using the platform. Forcing a difficult, necessary conversation. It apparently became a real reckoning on that issue.
And her mother's observation about the TV moment, you didn't yell.
Yeah, defining strength as control, letting the words land with weight, not just volume. It connects back to her mother's early lessons about restraint, doesn't it?
It really does. And returning to Tex Arcana, that conversation with the elderly woman at church, how do you keep so calm?
In her answer, it's deliberate. Calmness makes them have to listen. It's strength, not silence.
Yeah.
Brings everything full circle. Her roots, her strategy, her purpose.
So, looking beyond that one viral clip, her focus is clearly on lasting change, starting the Crockett Justice Fund.
Right, community-based legal aid. Addressing the systemic issues she saw firsthand.
And mentoring young leaders, telling them, I didn't keep from breaking, I just learned how to break better. That's incredibly honest.
It really is. Acknowledging the struggle but reframing it as learning resilience.
And continuing to hold the line in Congress, that quote, respect is not a tone, it's a line. Prioritizing principle over just, being polite for politeness' sake.
Yeah, drawing a boundary. Her presence itself is impactful. The narrative frames her as more than just a moment, more like a movement, pushing for real change, sharpening the truth.
So when you pull it all together, this deep dive into Jasmine Crockett's story, what are the big takeaways for you?
Well, it's definitely about the power of that calm strength, speaking truth directly even when it's hard, and showing that real impact, lasting impact, goes way beyond just getting attention online.
Yeah. And maybe for you listening, it sparks some reflection. Thinking about those times maybe you chose comfort over courage, silence over speaking up.
It makes you wonder, what could shift? What happens if you decide to stand firm, just a little more, even when sitting down feels so much easier?
That's definitely something to chew on. Maybe true strength isn't about how loud you are, but how deep you stand, how willing you are to hold that line.
Well said.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.